Good evening, everyone. Please rise to the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion? Rob, second. Jim. Any discussion or questions? Okay to vote. All in favor? 7-0 approved. Next up is the superintendent's report. Mr. Poole.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening, everyone. Let me start off with a hearty congratulations to the valedictorians of the class of 2021, Owen Barron and Mika Masawa, and the salutatorian, Dan Julian. We are just incredibly proud of their accomplishments, and I know we're going to hear great things about them for years to come. I could not think of three students that would better represent the Shoreham-Wading River High School and the class of 2021. I know we've heard their names over and over again throughout the years. Amazing students, amazing work ethic, and just really, really proud of them. Give them a round of applause for those three students. We also have so many students that are successful in the Career Technical Education Program that we offer students through our partnership with Eastern Suffolk BOCES. And I am also proud to announce that high school student Oliver Bum earned the title Employee of the Month in his Career Technical Education Program at the Bixhorn Technical Center in Bellport in the area of plumbing and heating for the month of March. Being selected as the Employee of the Month is an honor, and Oliver should serve as a role model among his peers. So congratulations, Oliver. We're proud of you, too. And recently, the Parish Art Museum's annual student exhibition is underway. It features works from 18 Shoreham-Wading River High School students. If you've been over there, that's probably a whole wing of the Shoreham-Wading, the Parish Art Museum. Congratulations to freshmen Sydney Albert, Liam McGuire, Kaylin Metz and Riley Metz, sophomores Gavin Melcher, Jessica Platts, and Kristen Tortora, juniors Lauren DeRosa, Rachel Scarborough, Leah Spitalieri, Jake Whitney, and seniors Jamie Johansson and Emma Longboat, Olivia Nicoletti, Yusra Rashizada, Brooke Groff, Julia Scheiber, and Troy White. And they're really part of that 60-year tradition at the Parish Art Museum, which showcases pieces of exceptional artists from schools on Eastern Long Island. And just special note, senior Olivia Nicoletti was cited in the graphic design digital media category, and both Yusra Rashizada and Julia Scheiber are for awards in the painting category, and underclassmen Gavin Melcher and Kaylin Metz were noted as ones to watch. So really proud of our art students. Congratulations to them as well. And I have to give a congratulations to all of the students that produced, ran, led, practiced, set up the student-run theater production of Mutually Assured Destruction. What a fantastic job by them. I know many people enjoyed it, so really proud of them, and I know the high school is actually working on the high school run play at the moment, so more to come on that, but congratulations to all those students. Just a few notes on some of the programs that are happening out of school. Really happy to share, we've done a lot of work on our social emotional learning program. That work continues. We don't rest on our laurels. This week at the middle school, and I'll thank Mr. Van, Mr. Ackerman, and our special education director, Ms. Von Eschen. They are piloting a middle school Empowering Minds program beginning this week at the middle school. So I know that's underway. I'm glad to share that. That program's been really successful in the K through 5 grades, and we'll share more as that pilot goes on and continues at the middle school. So really good news. The middle school, all of the K through 8 grades are finalizing field trips and outdoor education experiences. The 8th grade class will be visiting the Cradle of Aviation in May, and that will include a live Q&A session with astronaut Bill Shepard. So that's a great trip. I know this past week, kindergartners visit the Quag Wildlife Refuge, in separate groups, and it's just great to have the students out. And maybe a silver lining, coming out of COVID-19 might be a re-emphasis on outdoor learning activities, outdoor education, might be something good that comes out of the last few months. I want to congratulate the students in Mrs. Verdone's third grade class. They created, it's posted on our Facebook page, a wonderful video about autism that was shared throughout the building and community. Great job by the class, and I want to thank SEPTA as well for their leadership and support for students with autism. They really spearheaded the Go Blue, last week, and I know our staff and students really took up that charge, and it was just great to see all the participation and support for students with autism. So thanks to SEPTA for really putting their energies behind that. And just a little shout out to the students, fifth grade students in Wading River, and Mr. Aquaviva and Mrs. Sarasoli's classroom. They created a virtual wax museum as students were able to dress up, performed in character, and they had the opportunity to film their presentation and share it, enjoy it with families. So congratulations to them as well. Good to see the creativity and innovation in the classrooms. Over at Miller Avenue, if you drive by, you'll see a lot of classrooms outside. Recently, second graders, I had the chance to see some of those bird feeders, designed bird feeders, engineered them for different varieties of birds, so they're not all the same. And before creating them, students explored, designed what those particular bird types needed that were local to the area. And after creating them, students had the opportunity to be scientific observers and evaluate the success of each one. So I can say that there are some very happy birds at Miller Avenue. As well, you may notice around Briarcliff and Miller Avenue, there's many small plants and flowers. Students, as part of science and outdoor learning, are comparing growth by placing seedlings in various locations. And Miller Avenue has really opened up. We've had a number of guest readers reading stories outside. Guests are appropriately socially distanced. In fact, I enjoyed having the opportunity to go over there and read a story as well to a second grade class. So just a few highlights from things happening in some of our building. Had a meeting. We've had several meetings on community programs over the last few weeks. Those programs are taking shape, and I'm really happy to share that we're hoping those programs are going to look a lot like programs pre-COVID, with COVID safety precautions in place. So those athletic opportunities, the round-out program, music lessons, driver's education, things like that are beginning to take shape and being planned. So optimistic that those things will run close to normal for us, which is great for students and families. This evening, we have two presentations. One is changes to the New York State reopening guidance, which came out last Friday. So I will be sharing some of the highlights and some of the changes of that. Not all of it was changed, but some of the highlighted changes in that. We'll also be presenting on the budget, proposed budget for next year. I will start with some good news. Probably most of us are aware that the New York State aid increased across the state, and the increases for Shoreham-Wading River project to lower our tax levy down to 0.99% from the 1.34% we have been projecting based on the governor's proposed budget. I know Mr. Arcuri will be reviewing the proposed levy this evening as part of the proposed budget presentations. Everyone may recall our budget workshops began a couple of months ago at our public meetings and at our last meeting in response to the CDC guidance that came out that changed physical distancing requirements at the elementary level and under certain conditions at the secondary level. We paused to consider the budget and a budget program that reflects that the new guidance. Last week, New York State Department of Health adopted those changes, as I just mentioned, to reopen schools, and the proposed budget presentation this evening does reflect those recent changes for that. And I know as well Mr. Arcuri will spend some time on state aid with us this evening in his presentation. But I just want to make a note of the special federal aid that's in the budget, and then just a brief note on UPK funding that showed up in the budget as well. That showed up in the state aid runs as well. Districts across New York State are awaiting guidance on the use of that special federal aid. That special federal aid, which is, from what we know right now, is it intended for learning loss and/or reopening schools during the pandemic. is going to come with a series of applications and requirements from the New York State Department of Education. We do not have the application or the requirements. We do know that to capture that funding, you'll have to complete the application and submit it for approval to New York State. And we also know that developing the plans for the use of those two funding streams, which total around $2.4 million, is to be a collaborative process, one that we've historically used here in the school district, with stakeholders to develop a plan that we think best meets the needs of the students and our program for students in the school district. So more to come on that. We are promised the guidance by the end of April for those two federal, they really come out of the last two federal stimulus packages. So we are waiting the guidance from the state, and it's promised to us by the end of April, and we'll start planning then in the hopes that we can access that funding and use that funding to support students in the district in the very near future. Additionally, some may have noticed that in the state aid runs, for the first time, the Shoreham-Wading River School District has a brand-new funding stream, which is dedicated for universal pre-kindergarten provided to us through New York State. We are actually one of 210 districts in New York State to receive that UPK funding for the first time. We are awaiting additional guidance on the use of those funds as well. That is an application process. You have to develop a UPK plan, and there's an application and an approval process for getting approval to expense and run a UPK program. Again, we are awaiting that guidance. Those funds, like the two other federal aid funds, are special aid funds, and they are not like other federal aid funds for special education, or the title grants are not part of the budget as revenue or expenditure typically, and these funds are not either. The amount of the funding for UPK is $172,000. The funding is great for us to get for families and students, but it's not overly likely the funding would go too far at that value. We know the cost of pre-kindergarten, but we will work to maximize that funding and to use it to support students and families to the greatest extent that we can once we have that application completed and have some time to develop some plans for it. Just to note, a UPK program and that funding, again, is not in the budget at this time. I actually, just talking about the state aid for the school district and the New York State budget, I'd like to thank Assemblywoman Giglio and Senator Palumbo for taking the time to listen to what the district legislative committee, the district itself, what our students and families need, and advocating on our behalf through the state budget process. I truly appreciate their support and efforts. And then, but finally, last week as well, the Department of Health was busy. We did get updated graduation guidance, so we'll be reviewing that graduation guidance and ceremony guidance for the events across the school district in the hopes to maximize that, so that Mr. Parinello doesn't have to have 4 grade 5 ceremonies, and with the goal of having one class of 2021 graduation ceremony. So that is our goal, and that's the plan that we hope to develop and put in place. But more to come on that. So thank you. That concludes my report.
Great. Thank you. Lots of good news there, so appreciate that. I guess we're going right back to you, unfortunately.
Oh.
Next up is
or fortunately.
Fortunately, I want to give you a second to catch your breath. Reports and reviews. First up is the New York State Department of Health Guidance, Mr. Jerry Poole. Do you want to move?
Unless we should stay.
Actually, oh, you don't have your.
Okay, so as I just mentioned, last Friday evening, the New York State Department of Health, I guess, completed their review of the CDC guidance that came out over a month ago and issued a set of guidance documents, reopening guidance documents for opening schools, during the pandemic. You may recall that the last set of New York State Department of Health guidance for reopening schools in the pandemic came out July 17th this summer. Was an extensive document coupled with the Education Department's lengthy document as well. This guidance is helpful for all school districts, but reading it, one does get the sense that the guidance was developed for students, for districts and students that weren't attending in-person learning to provide some pathways for more access to in-person learning for district. Nonetheless, it does provide some help and guidance for us as a school district, but important to note that we have been in person here in the school district since the start of September. I'm going to start with and mainly focus on the relevant new guidance for New York State for reopening schools. Much of the other guidance is similar to the documents that were released over the summer, except for physical distancing. And the fact that physical distancing requirements and how you physical distance is now, for the first time in New York State, connected to transmission levels at the county level for that. So responsible parties may reduce physical distancing to a minimum of 3 feet, subject to certain mitigation strategies. I will share those. The CDC has developed 4 levels of indicators. They have recommendations that differ between elementary and the secondary levels, and they are required to be adhered to by any responsible parties when implementing physical distancing of less than 6 feet in the classroom. So sometimes you read these guidance documents and you look for the word, should, could, when it comes to the physical distancing part of the guidance, the word must and you have to and et cetera for that. So spend a little bit of time. I know we talked a little bit about this briefly when the CDC guidance came out about the transmission levels for counties and how they drive physical distancing allowances for schools. And then I'll go into a little bit about what does it mean for a school if you were in for a county, or if you are in one of those 4 transmission levels as it relates to reopening your school. So there are 4 transmission levels: low, moderate, substantial, high. For reopening schools purposes, if either one of the 2 indicators, and one of the indicators is the the Suffolk County total new cases per 100,000. That's the first number that's up there, that's under the red column. And the other indicator, and for every county in New York State, is the Suffolk County that has tested positive. And so this is the most recent data that was available for us. And right now, the requirement, right now, Suffolk County is at 298 cases per 100,000 residents. There are 1.47 million residents in Suffolk County. And the percent positive in Suffolk County is 3.6%, which I'm glad to see. That's showing a trend downwards, and hopefully that's going to continue, where maybe none of this is relevant anymore for all of us, I hope.
Real quick, what were the numbers? Didn't mean to catch you off guard, but what were the numbers last September when we opened? Seems like these numbers. This is more.
When we opened up, we were hovering around 1 to
locally,
2.
but what was the county?
I believe the county was 1%, 2% for a while over August, in the end of July and August, and really for quite a while in September as well. I think, if I recollect, it was in October, maybe after Halloween, things started to move up in that direction. So in order for that number 298, in order to get, and this is important to remember, in order for it to get down to substantial transmission, which is the orange level for a school, for a county, that number has to get down to no more than 99 new cases per 100,000 people in the county. So it's like it has to drop by 2/3. Not to paint a bleak picture, but Suffolk County is not alone. This is from the CDC website. and you could see much of New York State. The connection to transmission levels for reopening at the secondary level, which I'll explain in a moment, the current guidance, not sure how helpful that is with the current transmission levels for students in other places to get back. So these are, this is what you can do when your county is designated in one of these transmission levels. And remember those two things. You could look back and say, oh, we were low transmission, 3.6%. The rules are that you have to go with the worst data, which for this data would be that you're in the red zone for number of cases per 100,000 residents. So if one of the two is in high transmission, you're in high transmission. So for low transmission, moderate transmission, in those counties, elementary schools, middle schools, high schools can maintain a physical distancing of at least 3 feet between students in classrooms. So 3 feet becomes allowable now with low and moderate transmissions. In the category of substantial transmission, elementary, middle, and high schools can maintain physical distancing of at least 3 feet, and they recommend cohorting when you can do it. Where the change comes in between elementary and secondary comes in the high transmission category, which is where we are right now. In counties with high risk of transmission, elementary schools can go down to 3 feet regardless of the transmission level. So that's in all of the colors. Elementaries can go down to 3 feet. They recommend cohorting. We know our students are in cohorts, and most elementary students are already in a cohort as well. But when schools cannot maintain cohorting, which I think everybody recognizes that at the middle school and the high school level, if you are going to cohort students at the secondary level, they are all going to be taking the same classes. And we have such a diverse course catalog, diverse student interest, diverse tracks, diverse plans for post-high school careers, that cohorting at the secondary level would completely disrupt any high school's program. So cohorting is not possible. And when schools cannot maintain cohorting, you have to must maintain physical distancing of at least 6 feet between students in classrooms.
Mr.
So-
Poole, can I, just a quick question. Did the music guidelines shift at all in regard to the indicators?
The music guidance, a little bit later, I'll mention that, but the music guidelines for, they had the caveat for when you were exhaling breath at a high level, that you had to be 12 feet apart this year, and that was for band, that was for chorus, that was for especially exertive physical education classes. That has changed and has dropped to 6 feet, regardless of the transmission level. So they're saying now that for any activity that is exertive and breaths coming out at a high level, that it would drop to 6 feet. And we will definitely, even for this year, take the time in our reopening committee to review that guidance, think about our program, and see where that might be helpful for the music program and for music performances. You're not really in a band if you're 12 feet. You're a bunch of individuals playing together, but being 12 feet apart makes it difficult to feel
Absolutely.
like you're part of a group or an ensemble. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The current guidance, along with our current transmission levels, what do they allow right now for schools in Suffolk County? 3 feet of physical distancing for elementary schools, and 6 feet of physical distancing in middle schools and high schools where cohorting is not possible. So, thinking about it, across the state, that is a help for getting elementary students back into schools, but looking at the map of New York State, as I mentioned earlier, doesn't look particularly helpful for bringing all students back, especially at the secondary level.
So from a contact tracing standpoint, in the elementary school, it'll be 3 feet now, and the high school is still 6 feet.
That would be great if they the contact tracing limits for the state, whether it's schools or anywhere else, they have not changed as part of the updated guidance. I had that confirmed today myself with the Department of Health, that the contact tracing rules remain 6 feet. That rule of 10 minutes cumulative inside of 6 feet across a 24-hour period. So that certainly is still a factor for reopening as contact tracing. I think the hope is that we get down to, we can get down to kind of where we are now, which is, maybe we've been at around 0.05% to 0.06% daily positivity rate. But if we can get that number down to very few students a week, hopefully, 3 feet or contact tracing won't be as impactful, for students next year or even this spring, I hope.
It would even be nice if they allowed students to test out of quarantine.
Yeah, that
After-
is,
after
that
5 or
is
6 days.
CDC guidance does suggest that after 7 days, you could allow to test out. And from our perspective and families and students, 7 days would mean, okay, you miss 5 days, 2 days are going to be a weekend. So that's a lot better than it was 14, remember, at the start of the school year, and then it dropped to 10. So that's certainly something that we should be discussing with the Department of Health, since they have selected these particular regulations for reopening schools, but others they have not. And those are really impactful for students and families. And I'll just say an aside, contact tracing is difficult on a lot of levels. I think nobody wants to identify. I'll say this, I'll say it again. Students that we have been required to identify as close contacts through the Department of Health required contact tracing process in collaboration with them, those students, once identified in our school district, have not come down with COVID-19, even though they were identified as a close contact. So, and honestly, I think across the island that has been the experiences that I'm hearing in other districts that, we're identifying close contacts. It's really impactful for students not to be in school, and they're not developing, coming down with COVID-19, and they're returning to school. So hopefully more to come on that, and that some of those changes may come into place. I think I mentioned this a little bit sooner, but it took a little time to think about. So what would Suffolk County transmission data have to look like in order for grades 6 through 12 to be at 3 feet? We know that right now with the even at high transmission, schools could be at 3 feet, and we're reviewing this with the purpose of thinking about our next school year. But the Suffolk County percentages for a positive COVID-19 test would have to average below 10% over a 7-day period. I think I just shared that the last rolling average for us, I think, for Suffolk County was 3 or the last day here was 3.6%. So we're in the blue zone for that right now, and I said hopefully that keeps heading down there. And the other measure, the number of positive cases per 100,000 residents, which is connected with how many tests are given, right? The more tests are given, the more positives you're going to get. The Suffolk County total positive COVID-19 cases would have to average about 200 cases or fewer per day over a 7-day period. I believe yesterday, even though the percentages are down for New York State, that there were 629 positive cases in the county just on the one day, which gets you to a total of 3,000 in a week. So that's a dramatically higher number than the 200 cases or fewer per day. I'm optimistic that that number is going to drop, by the start of the next school year. But I think, moving forward and thinking about planning, we'll have to cautiously be ready to maintain 6 feet as a result of that number of 200 cases a day or fewer, and the inclusion of the word must maintain 6 feet of physical distancing. Whereas that's not the case at the elementary level. A few other notes on New York State Department of Health, April 9th, physical distancing exceptions. So 6 feet is required between adults, between students and adults. Have to digest that a little bit. I really cannot picture any classroom where the teacher is always 6 feet away from the students, so I'm sure that's not the case. There's some unpacking. There was a webinar from the Department of Health on this recently. It didn't give too much more clarity. I've spoken with my contact at the Department of Health at a higher level, and I know the county is still unpacking this guidance because there is some autonomy written into this Department of Health's guidance documents to give counties some local decision-making. So where they end up and what decisions are made, we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully sooner than later, some conclusions or county-level results or decision-making is shared with all of us. 6 feet of distancing still required for meals or snacks or when the masks are removed. So that's something that would have to be organized and considered and planned moving forward. And here's the piece about activities that require projecting the voice. Those must be 6 feet apart, which is actually a walk back from the 12 feet. And then, as we have been doing, we have the separated hallways, we have student space, so it continues in common areas and outside of classrooms. And one significant change in that is that the use of any barrier to support physical distancing is no longer wasn't recommended by the CDC or the New York State Department of Health as a tool for protecting against closer physical distancing than 6 feet. That what I just shared is really the relevant, impactful changes to the New York State Department of Health guidance. The updated guidance does continue to insist on the use of personal protective equipment, such as masks, hygiene. Our teaching children how to wash their hands, disinfecting stations, the cleaning and disinfecting in the school district, cleaning high-touch areas inside of the district with frequency. That has to continue, and of course, that is planned for, in the budget. Disinfecting at a high level, that as well is planned for in the budget at the level that we've done this school year. The screening continues in the guidance, the temperature checks, the attestation forms, signage in buildings, and all of the other pieces and parts in the reopening plan from the summer do continue in the new guidance document. But the chief or most important changes were really to physical distancing and the connection for the first time to transmission levels and the allowance of 3 feet at the elementary level at any of those transmission levels so that those students can return back to school. Just a couple of next steps. Certainly, the reopening committee, when the CDC guidance came out, we have a reopening committee formed in April of 2020. Really grateful for that group of people because without them, we wouldn't have the reopening plan that we have now. Their input, thoughts, suggestions, and all the time they put in over the 4 or 5 months we opened school this year was invaluable. We have continued to meet across the school year, as you may remember. And periodically, the committee, I've come with the recommendations from the committee to make some adjustments to, we've made adjustments to school closures, who's being quarantined, not quarantining the whole elementary classroom, just really selecting a few. That's been successful. So we will bring this, this guidance to the reopening committee. As I noted, they reviewed the CDC committee guidance, which is very similar, 3 feet, 6 feet. They're in support of moving to 3 feet. It's very different teaching at 6 feet from teaching even at 3 feet, and a lot of value to making the change for students instructionally in the school district. An added benefit for that and moving back to 3 feet is that the large group instructional spaces in the elementary buildings return to their intended purpose to support the music, art, library, and other things, in a school district, the Wading River cafeteria, things like that come back into our regular program and presents additional normalcy for students. So the reopening committee will meet to review these New York State Department of Health guidance documents, to go through them, better understand them, discuss them in the light of our current reopening plan. Certainly, any recommendations for draft revisions or changes to that will come to the Board of Education publicly, over the next couple of months as we move forward. And those really are the highlights. Certainly, as I started, we went through a budget process, as I mentioned earlier, that started a couple of months ago, with a budget that fully rolled over everything and every use that we have this year to successfully have all of our children come back to school this year. The CDC guidance came out. I think we had the sense that the New York State may follow suit with that guidance, as our neighboring states did very quickly. And that would and could impact the draft budget for the upcoming school year. So these changes are incorporated into the budget. I mentioned that the cleaning, disinfecting, isolation rooms, health aides, all those processes are incorporated, with the major change being the ability to pull back from 6 feet to improve program and programming in the school district. And certainly, it is worth saying, I know Mr. Rose mentioned it, certainly contact tracing and those identified would be impacted. But again, we don't know we'll be five months from now, and hopefully we'll be at a spot where we're 1 case a week or something like that. So it's really not impactful, hopefully. But I'm going to invite, I know Mr. Arcuri has the budget presentation, but certainly take any additional questions on the reopening guidance.
Any further questions? I just want to, applaud your, and commend you for staying on top of this as much as you have been. I've been on a bunch of the reopening committee meetings, and nothing but transparency and communication with the staff and the teachers and the parents who are on that committee. So it's great that I'm hopeful that we can get to a little further down the road and over the summer, and maybe see the secondary go down to 3 feet as well. But again, thank you again for all your work and putting this together for us.
Well, my pleasure. It was great work to do to get our students back, and I'm sure Mr. Arcuri mentioned it, but in case he forgets, I know starting the school year and planning for 6 feet secondary level, I really want to commend our teachers and our students. We are in some out of the ordinary learning spaces at the secondary level in many cases, and it's not like sitting in the classroom. Maybe a little harder to focus, but everybody has really worked hard to make that work in an effort to get everybody back. We are planning for next year, if we're at this 6 foot level, to get out of the main gym. So we have some plans in place. So Mr. Arcuri may be mentioning that, but I want to make sure we had that out publicly, that we're going to plan to get out of the main gym with a few other changes at the high school, so that the main gym can be used for gym and students aren't in the gym learning important topics. So. But with that said, I'll invite Mr.
Just to add one more thing, I think Katie wants to make a comment, but just, we've done such a great job as pivoting as well in this district. I mean, I think we saw that last year over the summer when we got a lot of this guidance last minute, and we were able to shift and be creative and get all of our students back, K through 12, 5 days. So if things were to go the opposite, I'm confident that we can figure it out and still get our kids back again in September.
I think so, and we will keep, the draft budget does not include the use of Briarcliff in it, the proposed draft budget that Mr. Arcuri will present this evening. As I mentioned at our last meeting, it was only opened out of the necessity to bring all elementary students back at 6 feet without opening it K through 2. It was a kindergarten through 2nd grade decision to get all of those students back at 6 feet. But nonetheless, as you noted, Mr. Lewis, we will keep Briarcliff at the ready for for the next school year, hopefully we can pull back of all the large group space at the high school, get everybody back to 3 feet, and if that does come soon enough, we will pivot and do what we need to do to make that. We currently are working on plans for both scenarios, 3 feet and 6 feet. The critical one will be for the school district. You may recall, we removed a significant number of walls at the middle school and the and the high school. The tricky part will be the timing of additional guidance or the dropping of the transmission levels in order to put some of those walls back up to provide those learning opportunities that we had in the past. And we're identifying which walls would go up and what classes would look like. And then the other pivot at the secondary level, if information comes soon enough, would be a shifting of the high school back to a 9-period day, for students. So we are working on both plans. I'll thank Mr. Piazzi and Mr. Holonia, the guidance department at the high school, for really thinking about both different scenarios in the event that one happens. So we'll be ready for, one or the other. If it comes abruptly where the walls have to, come down. Last year we delayed school by 2 or 3 days when we we need a little more time. Maybe that's something we have to do. I don't know, but hopefully numbers track in the right way. We get down to that transmission level solidly down there, and we all feel very comfortable with pulling back out of those I call them unique learning spaces, including the 2 alcoves here in the auditorium here. Back to a more normal structure for students. It's better teaching and learning when you're not 6 feet apart, in school. So.
Thank you, and I really appreciate, it's not a committee I serve on, but I appreciate the board trustees, the parents, the teachers, yourself, the administrators who are on that reopening committee. It's double, triple, quadruple work that you are all undergoing, and it's been consistent. I mean, I think that that's one of the most admirable things. It's not something that was initiated to just open and then fell by the wayside. It's just been an active, innovative, consistent group, and I appreciate your leadership in that. A lot of feedback our community has been giving is that active communication is so appreciated, and so I thank you for that. The slide that you presented on, I think it was number 10, on the continued guidance, I just thought it might be a good time to bring up, we had gotten an email from a resident who was curious about the use of masks and whether or not being at 6 feet at the elementary versus 3 feet at the elementary would be impactful with the mask wearing. And I see here that that has not been something that has changed, that whether our students are at 6 feet or 3 feet, that mask wearing will have to remain a consistent practice. And so I just figured I would bring that up at this time.
Yeah. That is absolutely remains in the guidance. There is no 6 feet or 3 feet. Masks must be worn when you're reopening schools. So to some extent, it's a little. It seems to be a little bit shorter guidance from the summer, and a little bit more, I'll say, stricter guidance from over the summer. But be that as it may, everybody should be assured that we will continue the use of masks, but at the same token, we will continue the use of mask breaks for students. I cannot go for 6 hours with my mask on, and I know for a fact that our students shouldn't have to as well. So those opportunities to get a break. I know there's still the medical exemptions in the new guidance for students that are medically exempted from that. It's not a large number in our district. So again, I'll go back to Mr. Lewis. I'm hoping that as time goes on, we get close to September, maybe hope, pray that the mask guidance and masks, and we can maybe start the school year in a very normal fashion. So, but thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up is the 2021-2022 budget presentation. Mr. Glenn Arcuri.
Good evening. Tonight is going to be the culmination of the 2021-2022 budget development process. As Mr. Poole pointed out, it definitely has been a journey. We had started with picking up where we are currently from a instructional standpoint, and then as the guidance changed, the budget changed. So I'm going to start with where we originally started. I have titled that the original plan. All students in school daily, a 6-foot socially distant model. Our plan for all students in school every day this year has been very, very successful. So we had originally developed a budget in order to roll over what our current plan is. Original plan, it was a fully COVID compliant plan based on the original guidance. Came with 6-foot social distancing, Briarcliff open. Came with also a 5.97 budget-to-budget increase. March 9th, we had covered 2 of the larger categories, covering almost 72% of the total budget. Then on March 16th, we had covered transportation through facilities, basically covering up to 93% of the total expenditures. And then the summary at this point reflected a 5.97 budget-to-budget increase, reflected a tax levy of 1.37%. At this time, state aid was based on the executive value provided to us in January. Also showed a large reliance on district reserves. On March 19th, the CDC issued revised guidance. That revised guidance allowed us to step back, and during the March 23rd Board of Education meeting, before the budget was presented, Mr. Poole presented the updated guidance that actually allowed at the elementary level to go back to 3-foot distancing. So during the March 23rd meeting, it was the consensus of the board to accept the superintendent's recommendation to allow us to go back, redesign the 2021-2022 budget in order to adhere to the CDC guidance. We were confident at that time that New York State Department of Health would eventually follow suit. At that meeting, we continued to present Proposition 2 and Proposition 3. Proposition 2 being the 2021 Health and Safety Capital Project, and Proposition 3 being the authorization to establish a capital reserve. So tonight will be the first time you're actually seeing the revised budget that is compliant with both New York State Department of Health as well as the CDC guidance. And it also includes the state aid figures that tie to the district's apportionment based on the adopted state budget. The revised budget provides for Briarcliff to be closed, kindergarten returns to Miller Avenue, the K through 2nd grade class size for kindergarten right now is approximately 17 students. That can change between now and the start of school. However, we have space inside of the building that if the numbers rise as high as they were this year, we're still very confident we're going to keep the class size down to 20. 3-5, the Wading River class size is between 20 and 21 students. Return gymnasiums, auditoriums, all-purpose room, libraries, cafeterias back to their original use. And at the 6-12 grades, we would continuation of our current COVID-19 model at the high school, with the understanding, as Mr. Poole pointed out, that a large gymnasium at the high school, we are going to do some minor interior wall changing at the high school, which will allow us to get out of the gymnasium in its entirety, so that'll be available to the physical education program. And at the middle school, we will be we have budgeted to roll over our current program. It is extremely important to not forget the budget. It is the maximum amount of money in order to develop the instructional plan. So if we are able to pull back, go to a 3-foot model, the funding just sits inside of the budget. It isn't something that we have to spend. We are only going to spend what we need to spend in order to deliver the instructional program that we want to deliver. Just another quick look at the class size. You could see compared to 1920, the kindergarten class size is on or about the same to what it currently is today. For grade 1, it is about 1 student higher. For grade 2, about 1.5 students to 2 students higher. Inside of grade 3, we are about 3 students less per grade, per section. For grade 4, we are about 4 students less per section. And for grade 5, we are about 3 students less per section.
Just to clarify that was a decision we made a year and a half ago to add sections to Wading River to bring those class sizes down, correct?
You are correct, yes.
And I could add that those class size numbers maximize available classrooms. It's a maximization of learning space in both of the buildings.
Could I ask a follow-up on the
Sure.
kindergarten 1, 2, 3? When I think about the staffing, what would the staff look like? Is there a teacher assistant? What does the makeup of our staffing look like in the different buildings then?
Inside of your standard class, which isn't an inclusion class, there is a single teacher. There is available assistance if there is specific needs inside of that particular class. If it is an ICT setting, there are 2 teachers there, and there are ICT TAs as well also inside of those classes.
Thank you.
So Proposition 1, 2021-2022 proposed budget reflects a 4.57% budget increase, down from a 5.97% increase, which was previously presented in the original plan. Tonight we will be discussing all categories, going through the entire budget. Employee salaries. Salaries are forecast based on contractual obligations outlined within each of the collective bargaining agreements, both the Teachers Association as well as the CSEA group. Their agreements run through June 30th, 2021. We anticipate negotiations to begin with both units in the near future. We anticipate salaries for all district staff are included in this category. I think it's important to point out that is a key feature to know this is the total salaries district-wide that is budgeted for. So you're able to see almost 50% of our budget is made up of teacher salaries, support salaries, it's support personnel salaries. That is important to know because we aren't a manufacturing facility. Our number one cost should be staff. Funding for the additional staff needed to meet the 6-foot plan, the plan that required us to be compliant at that time with 6-foot social distancing, that particular staffing group has been removed from the 2021-2022 budget. Employee salaries as a category reflects a 3.09% budget-to-budget increase and makes up 45.5% of the total budget. Employee benefits, this category collects the expenses related to all benefit costs related to salaries, whether it's pension costs, health insurance, optical, FICA, Medicare, unemployment. It's important to know that because, as I just mentioned earlier, we do plan on letting a large number of staff go because we are pulling back from the 6-foot plan. So there is an allocation in this category to account for unemployment costs. It's more than likely that most of the staff that will be moving on are going to land positions elsewhere. So we would not have to actually make that expense related to the unemployment costs. However, we do have to budget for it in case that expense does come to light. The teacher's retirement system reflects a 9.80 value for 21-22, which is 2.83% increase from the previous year. The employee retirement system reflects a cost of 18.5%, which is an increase of 12.12%. We anticipate that health plan premiums will increase, so we have included inside of the budget a 10% increase for 2022. Funding for related benefit costs for the staff needed to meet the education plan that required us to maintain the 6-foot social distancing has been removed from this category. And as I previously mentioned, funding for potential unemployment costs have been added. Transportation, the budget provides funding for the current in-district and out-of-district transportation configuration, busing for all students, field trips, athletic program, and unanticipated busing needs as they arise. There's always some contingent dollars included in many of our large budget category items for that what-if circumstance. The budget reflects an increase outlined in the second year of a 5-year transportation contract. All known private and parochial and special education transportation needs are accounted for. And it's important to note there hasn't been social distancing on our buses, and we are not planning for social distancing on our buses. In order to do that, we would basically have to double our bus fleet. And again, we have shown throughout this entire school year, there hasn't been a transmission occurring on the buses. But we do not believe that is a necessary item. Debt and transfers. This category reflects where any type of contracted debt that we have on our books or any transfers to any other funds or any type of borrowing that the district might do within the 21-22 school year. So we do have interest budgeted for tax anticipatory notes. The tax levy payments do not begin until late December, and they end in June. So for the period July through November, we are actually relying on the money that is on hand. And as we prepare our cash flow projection, if it shows that there will be a funding shortfall inside of a given month, which usually lives in October, November, we would do a short-term borrowing. That isn't something that the district is in control over as to when the tax payments begin to be received.
Can I just ask a question on the TANs? Is that, are we able to borrow from our reserves and then pay ourselves back so we don't accrue the interest?
I'm happy to say that we have not used TANs in
Okay.
probably 5 or 6 years. There are one or two reserves that are not accounted for inside of the general fund that we are not allowed to use the funding from, but we do use the funding in any reserve that's accounted for inside of the general fund. So that's a great thought, and then we haven't taken advantage of it. But I always like to point out that if the taxing process would be a little bit more considerate for the school districts that are on a fiscal year, and maybe begin our tax payments in July, it would help out a lot of districts. So I don't anticipate having to go out for a TAN in 21-22, but it's always important to keep that interest line factored in in case the need arises. Inside of this category, the annual bond payment, principal and interest associated with the 2015 voter-approved bond referendum is included in this category. The final payment for this debt is June 15th, 2032. Interest and principal for both energy performance contracts, the 2007 energy performance contract, final payment scheduled for September 16th, 2022. 2016 energy performance contract, final payment scheduled for June 15th, 2031. Transfer to the cafeteria fund budget line, support district-wide food service program, and transfer to special aid fund, which are funds used to support the summer school services for students with disabilities. Special education. Special education funding allows for the following: student placements to meet individual student needs, out-of-district placements including BOCES, residential placements, staff development to support our teaching staff, integrated co-teaching models of instruction, behavior modification, school law, reading methodology, equipment purchases for the following programs: Learning Center, RISE program, integrated co-teaching, and related services for school-based counseling, physical therapy. PT is designed to provide school-based therapeutic interventions to students who require remediation for gross motor deficits and functional mobility so that students can safely navigate their natural learning environment. Supports for our teaching staff on behalf of our students, behavior consultation, educational consultation, hearing and vision consultations, OT and PT consultations. Tutoring services and home instruction. Students who are out of school for a prolonged periods of time may require this service to support their educational needs. And as part of our secondary integrated co-teaching model, students participate in a specialized academic support period. Services from this current year remain the same: residential, private, and public placements, cross contracts, state mandated testing, related services for OT and PT, and contingencies are built in to this budget category to address unanticipated student needs as well as unanticipated additional student enrollment. Psychiatric contracted services and contracted services through BOCES. It is important to note that we issued requests for proposals so that we are fresh up to date with what the current market prices are. This is something that we like to do, if not every 2 years. Sometimes we even do it annually. This year we did go out only after a single year in order to ensure we are getting the best price for the services that we need. This budget category reflects a 1.83% increase. It also makes up 4.64% of the total budget. And as we get to this point, we've covered 88.4% of the budget. Facilities, budgeted amounts for specific utilities and maintenance contracts have been adjusted to align with projections. The equipment budget provides funding to allow for the purchase of disinfecting misters and sprayers. As Mr. Poole mentioned earlier, there hasn't been any relief given to the districts when it comes to disinfecting the buildings. So the current guidance still requires nightly disinfecting high-touch areas throughout the day. So it is important for us to keep up with the necessary equipment needed so that we could continually do a very efficient job with our existing staff, not having to add additional staff to do this extra disinfecting. I think it's worth pointing out what a fantastic job all of the district staff have done, whether it's the teachers cleaning their own areas at their own will, whether it's the monitors cleaning between lunch periods, whether it's the food service staff assisting cleaning between lunch periods, and the district-wide custodial team. We had added some custodial aides, but between the custodial aides that were during the academic school day, but the existing custodial staff has been able to do the nightly disinfecting in all 5 buildings. They have done a fantastic job. They have had a number have been out due to COVID, and we never missed a beat. Someone else stepped up, someone else did an extra area, and it is another testament to just another group of staff inside of our district that just stepped up to the occasion and have done an outstanding job. Replacement for the mail delivery vehicle, replacement security vehicles, tables and chairs, industrial floor equipment, as well as other small items. One-time maintenance project budget has been increased. Planned maintenance projects are partial field perimeter netting on middle school athletic field, high school classroom modifications related to the science and technology programs, and middle school ceiling and lighting replacements in specific locations. Buildings and grounds improvements include some duct cleaning, parking lot striping, irrigation, classroom shades, exterior doors, softball and baseball backstops, bathroom partitions, counters, flooring, fencing, tree pruning, and asphalt repairs in certain locations. In this budget category, there's an increase of 7.11%, or approximately $236,000. District-wide expenses. Funding district-wide budget codes provides the means towards delivering world-class opportunities through access to extensive BOCES career technical education programming, instructional technology programs, extensive field trips and cultural arts programs, ongoing renewal of online text collections, diverse college and career readiness activities and events, extensive co-curricular activities, instrumental program beginning in grade 3, robotics program, secondary library makerspaces, theatrical performances, instructional equipment, student access to wide range databases and online resources. Services that are not building specific, Board of Education, auditing services, legal and fiscal agent services, property and liability insurance, central printing, public information, the district treasurer, the district purchasing agent, district clerk and district meetings, judgments and claims. And in the instructional category, equipment, textbooks, supplies and materials, musical instrument repairs, field trips, arts and education programs, co-curricular activities, library books and periodicals, occupational educational programs, BOCES instructional services, guidance services, psychological services, and charter school tuition. There were some reductions in the following areas: fiction and nonfiction textbooks, supplies and materials. Funding has been increased to support the BOCES program, services and administrative costs, conferences to support professional development, district-wide field trips, instructional equipment, and contractual services. The total increase in this category is a little more than $18,000, or 0.54%. Technology. The proposed budget maintains all program services from this current year. Maintenance and support and warranties, contractual increases related to the network, firewall, website, database services, and user licenses. As I'm sure you can appreciate, with a K-12 Chromebook program, there is a increase inside of the number of licenses, the total cost for the warranties. However, we were able to see savings inside of other areas. So we were able to bring this category to a net reduction due to a reduction in contracted services for IT support. Even with that reduction, the net change, because we also have increases related to backup and restoration services, enhanced cybersecurity measures, additional subscriptions and license related to digital learning, and lease payments related to replacement of Chromebooks, approximately 4 grades. So it isn't uncommon to see ups and downs inside of the technology code for the types of service or the types of equipment that we would be purchasing, but we do try to keep the year-to-year budget change as close to zero as possible. Curriculum and staff development, ongoing professional development, conferences, workshops, subscriptions, increases related to one-time equipment purchases for replacement of wall pads in the Wading River Gymnasium, 3 outdoor permanent basketball hoops at Wading River, end-of-year recognition events, graduation and moving up ceremonies, curriculum development consultants, and supplies and materials. Athletics. Program maintains all teams from 2020-2021. At the high school, there are 44 teams. The middle school, there are 24 teams. In the 2019-2020 shortened athletic season due to the closing of in-person learning due to COVID, we had 235 scholar athletes before we closed for COVID. Anticipated one-time purchases that are included inside of the budget: volleyball standards, protective netting for the middle school field, Project Adventure equipment for the high school, wrestling center equipment, wrestling mats for the middle school. Some of the recurring purchases that are that funding is included in the budget for: uniforms, supplies and materials, equipment purchases, Section 11 officials and administration fees, and other related expenses necessary to operate the athletic program. Funding is included in order to allow all of the reconditioning of all of the district-owned athletic equipment. So this isn't something that is new to this year, but I just wanted to highlight it. Mr. Passamonte wanted to highlight it also, to let people know that the equipment goes out every summer to get reconditioned, cleaned, and that process has always included sterilization.
Just a quick question. Athletic facilities, that line item for maintenance is in the facilities line item? That's not in this, not
Correct.
capture this, okay.
Correct. Community programs, pre-K through grade 12 student programs, 45 programs are offered. Elementary students, 1920 school year, 1,486 registrants. Secondary students, 860 registrants. Adult education programs, 11 programs are offered. 1920 school year, 364 registrants. Summer programs for roundout, 165 to 175 registrants. The Music Institute, 120 to 130 registrants. This school year, we have operated as many programs as possible while adhering to the COVID-19 operating parameters, and plan to do the same in 2021-2021 school year. As Mr. Poole mentioned earlier inside of his superintendent report, he has had numerous meetings regarding community programs, and when and where possible, we do plan on continuing to offer as many programs that are possible. In this budget category, there's a slight decrease of $2,000 or 1.62%.
It's great news. I think a lot of parents are going to be excited about these offerings over the summer, so great job.
Health services from 2020-2021 remain the same. School physician and nurse services, health services for parentally placed students, athletic and annual physicals for students, equipment maintenance and replacement, and supplies and materials. There's a very minimal increase in this category of $286 or 0.23%. It's important to note that any PPE that is purchased, we put through the facilities budget. We do not run it through this health services budget. we specifically put it through the facilities budget codes. It is easier for us to track in order to apply for whatever subsidy that is available to us. We figured a centralized purchasing process for that would be in the best interest for the district when it comes to claiming any available aid related to PPE. Personnel, the recruitment, training, and evaluation of staff, online application system, advertising, substitute teacher service, BOCES career fair, and the Affordable Care Act consultant, increases related to contractual obligations, and a reallocation of contractual services to another category accounts for the reduction of the $6,500 in this category. Any questions on any of the categories that we just finished covering? I know I went through them rather quickly, but I could go back to any category if anyone has a specific question. Okay, looking at the revised year-to-year snapshot, the year-to-year comparison, as I mentioned earlier, is a 4.57% budget-to-budget increase. The tax levy has gone from 1.37 to 0.9981. I'm going to get into that a little later, but that is related to the increase in building aid from the executive budget run to the final adopted budget. So right there, we saw a decrease of 0.40% of the district tax levy. State aid reflects an increase, $1,329,000. I'll get into state aid a little bit later. Matter of fact, I'm going to get into all the other revenue categories shortly. So this is the summary. You can see that the expenditure budget increase is $3.5 million, and the revenues are increased $3.5 million. As we move into the 2021-2022 revenue budget, it's important to note the 2020-2021 state aid, this year's state aid, that the district budgeted $12,149,647 in state aid revenue. This was $639,000 less than the governor's proposed budget amount for the 2020-2021 school year because of the concern of mid-year state aid reductions that the governor continually told us during last year's budget development process of up to 20%. So as of today, we plan on receiving that $639,661. This is an important point to try to make, to try to bring to light, because as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the year-to-year increase for state aid is $1.3 million. We aren't seeing an increase of $1.3 million in state aid from year to year. For budgeting purposes, we are seeing that. If we compare the 2020-2021 adopted state budget to the 2021-2022 adopted state budget, the year-to-year increase is $689,462. So if last year at this time, the governor did not continually threaten a reduction of mid-year state aid cuts, we more than likely, like we've done for all of the years that I was here prior to last year, budgeted for our full amount of state aid that was included inside of the state budget. But with those continued threats of mid-year reductions, we chose to play the conservative route, protect the district's programs, protect the district's revenue stream, and budget for 10% less than what was allocated for us. So if we compare the 2020-2021 district revenue budget for state aid to the 2021-2022 adopted state budget, That's where you're seeing an increase of $1.3 million. Show it to you inside a chart format. Inside of the red box that I have highlighted there, that is comparing the adopted state budget for 2020-2021 to the adopted state budget for 2021 to 2022. That's where our increase is $689,462. That's going to be the value that most likely you will see inside of Newsday when they report the year-to-year increases, assuming they don't try to lump the federal aid with the state aid. But if you compare the far left column, which was the district's revenue budget, to the 2021-2022 adopted state budget of $13,478,000, that's where our increase is of $1.3 million. I'm trying to make something that I know is complicated. I'm trying to spell it out as clearly as I can for the people that watch the video, for the people that are listening at home now. Does anyone have any questions on the state aid increase from 2020, 2021 to 2021 to 2022? Moving on to 2021, 2022 state aid. January 20th, 2021, the executive budget school aid report was released, and at that time, we were set to receive $12,797,922. This was the revenue amount for state aid that was used in the February 23rd, March 9th, and March 16th presentations. This is very common. The state doesn't adopt their budget until on or about the first day of April. We start budget presentations in February. So we use the value that is on the executive report. Usually we don't deviate too far from this value. On April 6th, when the state budget was adopted, the total amount was $13,478,770. As an aside, that doesn't include the UPK amount that's allocated inside the state aid run of $172,800. So we have realized the net increase of $680,848 from the value that we were using from the executive run.
Can I just clarify, Mr.
Sure.
Curry, on this? So on that one, the 680, is that because of the new state aid?
That is
Okay.
because of the additional foundation aid as well as the additional building aid.
So the 680 was the new run that you received?
Yes. I am actually going to show you that in detail in two or three more slides. The enacted state budget outlines the process for which foundation aid will be fully restored to our $8,158,108 value in the next 3 years. So in 2021, 2022, we are seeing an increase in foundation aid of $437,663. This value was calculated as a phase-in increase of 26.25% of the difference between what our total foundation aid of $8,158,108 and our base foundation aid, which is $6,490,820. That base foundation aid has been the same for the past 3 years. So they took what we were receiving in 2020, 2021, 2019, 2020, created a base amount for us of the 6.490. You took our fully restored value of 8,158,000. You subtract the two, multiply that difference by 26.25%, and that's how they calculated our increase of $437,663. Now, that's for year one. That's 2021, 2022. They have written into law that in 2022, 2023, we are set to receive an increase of $614,812. This is a phase-in increase of 50% of the difference of the total foundation aid, again, the 8158,108, and the 2021 foundation aid, and I'm seeing error, and I do apologize, the 6490820 there should be approximately 6.9 million. I apologize for that error. But it's supposed to be the foundation aid for 2021, 2022.
So that's a 6.49 plus the 437?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I apologize for that error. I could proof these numbers 1,000 times, and I could stand up here now.
It's only
and say-
75 slides. I can't
and
can't
say to
understand why
myself,
you would
how
have
did
an error.
how did I miss that? I've only looked at it 100 times, and I do, again, apologize for that. 2023, 2024, we are set to receive another $614,812, which is the phase-in increase of 100% of the difference between the 8158,108, which is a total foundation aid, and our 2022, 2023 aid of $7,543,296. So it's wonderful to know that in the next, what our foundation aid is, written into law, how much we should receive in the next 2 years after this year.
Mr. Arcuri, the value of $8.1 million, I know they use the language of restore or fully fund foundation aid. We've never had that value of foundation aid. It's correct that that value is determined by a lawsuit in New York State from 2008 that established a formula that set foundation aid for school districts that until now has never been or was not planned to be fully realized for schools.
100% correct. Yes. We have never seen that value, but that's a value they have set for Shoreham-Wading River. So any questions on 2021, 2022 state aid?
I guess, just thinking about the next 3 years looking forward, the community, taxpayers, as we think about those increases, Mr. Arcuri, right? When I compare it back to the expense this year, or the tax levy, I should say, the tax levy this year is roughly 552,000, right? The .9981.
Yep.
So in effect, if I carry this forward, nothing is certain, right, in terms of state aid. But this actually does a pretty good job of starting to put a, quote unquote, somewhat of a dent into our future expenditures, right, in terms of the state aid, because it'll go up from 437 to 614, and then it flattens again at 614. Is that right?
It will definitely help, but I'm going to quickly go back to slide 14
Yep.
and just want to quickly cover that. If you just look at salaries and benefits, you're looking at approximately a $2.7 million increase in order to keep the machine running. So it is definitely putting recurring revenue back into the district's revenue stream, which is wonderful. Recurring revenue is the only way to survive. So seeing a levy of approximately a $500,000 increase and seeing increases inside of state aid, as one could say, staying within the tax levy limit is recurring revenue. Seeing state aid increasing is recurring revenue. The more recurring revenue that we are able to get, that increase on an annual basis, will continue to reduce our reliance on one-shot revenues, meaning use of reserves or unappropriated fund balance. So you are 100% correct. It is putting a large dent. I don't even want to say a small dent. When you're looking at a 2-year cycle of 600,000 and 400,000 for this year, add those two together, you're between $1 million and $1.1 million come 22, 23. That is a wonderful addition of recurring revenue.
Yeah, I'm just thinking as we continue to watch expenses as we go forward, building revenue budgets, that'll be an advantage as we look ahead, district.
It will definitely be advantageous to the taxpayers,
Yep.
as well as retaining program with recurring revenues. You know,
Thank you. Yeah.
and that's that term, you know, having, and being able to see that it's not a promise of that restored foundation aid to that full limit, to see that it's written in, it definitely helps with projections for, from my standpoint, to know how do things look going forward.
Well, it's been part of the legislative committee, Mr. Poole, the foundation aid, lobbying the state and our, appropriate state legislature and whatnot. Good to see that that was acted upon this year. And Mr. Curie, a compliment. The fact that you knew to go to slide 14 just off the top of your head, that was pretty funny. Just need to say that.
I guess one could say I had anticipated the question.
You knew that was coming, and I didn't plant it.
Oh, it's definitely not, but you know your audience. You have to know your audience when you're standing here.
That's funny.
Mr. Chairman, we've been fighting for incremental increases.
Right.
It was flat for 2 years now. We've been fighting for incremental fare, incremental allocations and increases to the school district. The $460,000 increase in foundation aid, for me is a little bit of payback for years lost where we should have seen more of an increase in foundation aid. So it's great to get that back. And as Mr. Arcuri noted, to have that as a recurring revenue stream that's going to cap at $1.5 million of recurring revenue in year 23, 24 is good news for
It cuts
residents
into-
and keeping
yeah.
our world-class programming so that
Well, yeah.
it can continue.
Exactly, so we can maintain programs. I just said it cuts into the tax levy ultimately is what it does as well.
It does, and we've averaged for the last 4 years 1.36% levy over the last 4 years, which is relatively low levy increases over the last 4 years, and this year's down to a 0.99 as a result of the state aid increases, so it's good news.
Now, there are 3 new categories on this year's state aid run. We are all not 100% certain how they're going to show up inside of Newsday. So I really hope to cover them here tonight. Mr. Poole mentioned them in detail earlier. I'm going to be looking at it and speaking to it from the perspective of it could show up in Newsday on our state aid runs because they did exist. That's how they were reported to us. But none of these revenues are able to be captured inside of the general fund. Getting a little bit accounting-ish is the taxpayers vote on the general fund budget. The Board of Education adopts a general fund budget. The state aid reported prior to this point is all state aid that is realized inside of the general fund. So it's included inside of the general fund revenue budget. The category for universal pre-K, the funding related to one of the stimulus packages and the funding related to the second stimulus package, if you look at the 3 different fundings there, they're about $2.6 million. They all come with a different plan. How to access the funds, how long you have to access the funds. But the most important thing to note for tonight's presentation, they aren't general fund revenue that we could use as a revenue source to our general fund budget. So the 3 categories of federal revenue are all accounted for in this special aid fund. As I mentioned, will not be included in the 2021-2022 revenue budget. Access to the funding, those 3 funding categories, is believed to be similar to how we currently access other federal grants. Develop a plan, submit a plan. After approval of your plan, you could spend the funds. What that means is there's going to be a process. There's going to be guidance hopefully provided to us on or before April 30th. Once that guidance is received, more than likely it'll be a combination between Mr. Meinster, Mr. Poole, various committees, whether it's the CDC committee, whether Ms. Von Eschen is part of it from the special education standpoint, from the social emotional learning standpoint. There's going to be a group of people that are going to be looking through this, obtain the necessary support needed from different staff, have the necessary meetings in order to develop a solid plan as to what's the best way to use these resources. However, for tonight, the main point is if they try to include universal pre-K funding of $172,800, and then they add the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2020 funding of $1.9 million, and then they add the American Rescue Plan funding of $575,000, lump it all together with our $13 million and say the district received $15 million in revenue. If that's how it is reported in Newsday, that's how it is reported in any publication. Yes, we are scheduled to receive those funds, but no, we cannot use them to offset any of our 21-22 spending plan. Does anyone have any questions on that? Do they need it? Is there anyone that needs additional clarity?
No, I read somewhere too that you would also need probably a public hearing before you submit the plan.
I'm certain that you're going to need things that they
So it's-
gave us the revenue, which is a wonderful thing to have. You could extend the American Rescue Plan to September 2024. You could extend the Coronavirus Response Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act funding to September 2023. So we do have time to develop those plans, and I'm confident that whether a hearing is required, I would be very, very surprised if it is not discussed at a future Board of Education meeting.
Do you have any idea how they come up with these numbers?
I could tell you that it's about a 2.5-page calculation,
Okay.
how they gave me the allocation. I don't have that one.
Yeah, I was just
memorized.
curious because I know we had talked about tracking coronavirus spending.
We are,
I was just curious if the 1.9 or the 575 was something that correlated with the cost that it took, one-to-one Chromebooks.
I could tell you
Opening
no.
up district.
Definitely not.
Okay.
The tracking of our expenses ties to the 2020-2021 Federal CARES Act pandemic adjustment. The first stimulus that is not included here because it was included in the 2020-2021 state aid run. I'll show you that in 2 slides.
Well, that was like $72,000, right?
Correct.
That didn't really get us
So
very far.
all of our lists and a lot of how that turned out, a Chromebook is not going to be aidable, meaning I cannot claim reimbursement for it because it isn't a disposable item. I could claim hand sanitizer. I could claim disinfecting solution. I could claim paper towels. There are things that we're able to claim that we are able to get reimbursed for, but if it's something such as a disinfecting mister that has more than a single use, then it becomes a district asset. They didn't see that as a reimbursable item. However, I will definitely mention, we were able to capture some aid back for those Chromebooks. So when and where possible, because we purchased them through BOCES, we will see BOCES aid on them. So I see a 33% return. So even though the federal government might not have reimbursed us, we were able to purchase the Chromebooks at the most economical way in a net number to the taxpayer.
Mr. Curtis, was fair to a couple of points on this federal aid that was shared with us through the state aid runs, and these are not typical state aid budget lines. They're not recurring revenue. They are really intended to, so to speak, one-time costs to address the pandemic and the impact on the pandemic on students. That's one part of it, and the inability to apply it to any school's general fund budget in a school district is not a district decision or even an auditing or accounting. That is a directive from the state education department that you are not to use these funds. They are special aid funds.
Correct. Are they guaranteed? Because I read somewhere too that they may be first come, first serve it, depending on how quickly we can get our,
Since this has come out, I have attended probably 5 or 6 webinars on it. I have not heard that at all. I have definitely heard that they are, you could extend those funds, and usually when you can extend funds, they are earmarked a certain dollar amount, similar to the Smart Schools Bond Act funding. That wasn't a hurry up, use it or lose it process. That was, you have an allocation, you have to use it by a definitive end date, and you have to jump through 9,000 steps to be able to use those funds. But happy to report that Mr. Esposito has probably used 85% of those funds. We have completed the process. We're getting our reimbursement for it. So we do have a district team that knows this process very, 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 very well.
so these are earmarked regardless of the state's finances in the future. This is something they can't pull back.
My
This is federal,
understanding
right?
is it's federal dollars that are just being funneled through the state.
Okay. So we seek the state for reimbursement then?
We seek an application process, and the state is definitely, for the UPK, yes. For the other two, more than likely, we're going to be seeking federal reimbursement for it, which, please know, as I mentioned earlier, we already receive federal grants. We already have accounting systems. We have staff that are familiar with this. It's just a different grant with a different name, with a different set of criteria and a different set of forms that we are going to have to file in order to seek reimbursement. So we have a great system. We will develop a great plan like we do for spending of any dollars. A strong plan is developed with the proper audience in order to come up with the best plan. State aid breakdown.
I'm sorry, Mr. Crowe. I just, I know we had a conversation, but it is fantastic news, though.
Yeah, it is. It's good news. Look, at the
that
end of
is
the
great
day-
news for
Look,
the school district and the program. I know we're the nuts and bolts of it, but it will be impactful over the next few years. It just takes time.
I think
It takes time.
I think there were a few people in the community that were excited about universal pre-K, but I mean, one, it's not a significant amount of money if you break it down per pupil, but also, the amount of time it's going to take to put together a plan, to get it approved, to get it to try and then push the plan forward. It's unrealistic that it would be ready in next September, if anything.
Well, that's one grant we're going to push to see if we
Okay.
can maximize the use of it right away. So as soon as that's out, we will hit the ground running. We're thinking already. So
Okay, good.
hopefully, a lot of it will be communication. Whatever the plan is, however we use it, getting that out to the families that could use whatever the plan is in a timely manner, so that it can happen in September will be
That'd be
key.
great.
Another way I'm thinking about it is I think about the last year and the investment we made to reopen, and we look at these funds, in a way, it's a gift, not a gift, but in which we're able to take the money fast forward and use it for other projects and other initiatives, and sort of repaying the district for its
Yeah,
past
yeah.
fund use.
Yep.
So I'm looking forward to, going through where this can be used and what projects and things that we can come up with.
Yeah.
So if you look at state aid by the state aid categories, as I mentioned earlier, foundation aid reflects a $437,663 increase. Even though it sounds like a large sum of money, it's a 6.74% increase for a recurring revenue. BOCES aid reflects a $96,000 increase. That BOCES aid, hardware technology, software, transportation, high-cost aid, private cost, excess aid, those are expense-driven aids. So what we spend, a portion is returned back to us. I am very happy to say, between the executive run and the adopted state budget, we were able to receive an increase in building aid of $227,908. That's a very significant number. The reason why it's significant is that $227,000 increase in building aid is what changed the tax levy from 1.37 to 0.99.
Gotcha.
So For the bond capital projects, we complete a project, it looks completed on the outside, the work is finished, but not until when the paperwork is finalized, the last check is cut, all the forms are submitted to the State Education Department, which the business office, the facilities department put a tremendous effort to hurry up, get those projects closed out, get them sent up there before Thanksgiving, get them sent up there before December 15th, which is like the last day. So we were able to get one of our last large projects up there. That increase in building aid is a direct savings to the taxpayer. So even though we show an increase in state aid, that increase in state aid isn't just dollar for dollar, because you saw a reduction of $209,000. That was the net change between executive run and adopted run inside of the tax levy. As I mentioned earlier, last year, for potential mid-year state aid reduction, we saw that reduction of $639,661, something I tried to explain earlier. We aren't receiving $1,329,000 in additional state aid. You have to subtract the 639 from the 13. That is the real year-to-year increase.
Yeah. I was just trying to it looks a little clunky still, you know, like
It's
like
very,
10%.
it's very, very clunky.
10% isn't really 10%. So what is the increase if you take the 639 out?
It is about 5.7%. Again, I go back to the governor that beat on us last year. You're going to have a 20% decrease. You're going to have a 20% mid-year state aid cut. So we did the right thing.
It wasn't even mid-year, wasn't it? Wasn't the
He was
first
threatening
It
a
was
mid-year.
4 review cycles,
four?
right?
Yeah,
I was gonna
and,
say, yeah.
and nothing
There were
changed.
4 review
That's-
cycles. He
nothing
never
changed either one.
reduced it, you know. Prudently, Mr. Arcuri, the
No, I'm
plan
not
reduction.
questioning what
we
you
all
did.
thought
I'm
it was
just-
gonna come. We
I'm
all
saying that the
remember-
10% doesn't, it's not really 10%.
Again, it's still a wonderful thing. We're seeing an increase in budgeted state aid of $1.3 million. I just don't want everyone to give the governor the credit for the $1.3 million. Give him the credit for $600,000. Don't give him the credit for the whole $1.3 million.
I'll give you the credit for the building aid.
I mean, we're not getting 14 million like some of our neighbors, but I'll take
absolutely.
the
20,
600,000.
Really, Mike.
Moving on to the other revenue categories, pilot and other local revenue. For those of you that, again, pilot is payment in lieu of taxes. Those are contractual arrangements made with large entities within our taxing jurisdiction in order to level out their tax payments. So we're looking at a slight reduction. The reduction here is primarily driven by the very, very low interest rates that are currently available inside of the banking institution.
Just to remind me, Mr. Curie, the pilot payments, are they pretty much fixed, or do they vary based on revenues, or how are
They
they
vary.
based?
They definitely vary year to year. They vary, and there is a incremental increase. We were very, very concerned. We were sent a letter in early December to say that due to the COVID pandemic, be very, very cautious of pilots being reduced. We happen to be very fortunate. COVID could not impact the solar panels. They couldn't impact the cross-sound cable, and they did not impact the peaker plant. I do have some colleagues that had pilot payments coming from retail establishments that saw us, one colleague in particular saw a 70% reduction inside of his pilot payment. Now, reductions in pilot payments, opposite of building aid. Building aid saved the taxpayers money. If pilot payments fall off or are reduced, the taxpayer, without a supermajority, you don't need 60%, see an increase inside their taxes, primarily because it is a component of the tax levy calculation. It is an allowable exclusion that if you don't have that exclusion, the taxpayer has to make up the difference. So we stayed on top of that. Have a great contact over at the Brookhaven Industrial Development Agency. They're wonderful there, support us great. And they stayed in very close contact with us to make sure that this was intact. Use of district reserves. What I like to do at this point is to present the June 30th, 2020 reserve balances as audited by our external auditors, reflect the allocation to the 2020-2021 budget, which is our current budget, then come up with a current balance, and then show you the anticipated allocation to the 21-22 budget. As I mentioned earlier, there is an increase in our allocation of unemployment insurance. We plan on using $668,000. Retirement contribution, plan on using $601,000. And workers' compensation, we plan on applying $300,000. 2021-2022 revised tax levy limit calculation. As I mentioned a few times tonight, our tax levy, wrong button. Our tax levy is 0.9981%. Again, it was 1.3664 or 1.37, but was reduced because of the additional building aid received of $203,995. We are not seeking to pierce, we're not seeking to have a supermajority, we're only looking for 50% plus one when it comes to the vote. I go through the tax levy calculation again, just if anyone has any questions on it. Before exclusions, we have a negative 1.88 tax levy. Once you factor in the exclusions, we come up to a 5.21% tax levy. Then we have to reduce our aidable offsets. So when you take off your BOCES building aid and you take off your SWR building aid, we're down to 0.9981. Any questions on the tax levy? Any questions on any of the revenue categories? Just a little bit of history on the tax levy. What
Mr.
we-
Kerr,
sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. The tax levy, so you won't know until after we adopt the budget what that looks like by talking to the towns respectively, what that looks like to the taxpayer rate? Is that?
We don't actually know that till around October,
Okay, that's all.
because when the assessed values come out, that information is provided to us over the summer and in September. And then the biggest piece that we wait for is the equalization rate that is provided to us by the New York State Office of Real Property Tax Services. Without the equalization rate, we are unable to apportion our tax levy across our two taxing jurisdictions, the town of Riverhead and the town of Brookhaven. So whatever I would tell you today is speculating. I don't have the pieces to provide that.
That's fine, thank you.
So over a 5-year period, if you look at 2017-18, our tax levy was $53,388,990. We are proposing a $55,944,041 tax levy. As I mentioned there, the final tax levy will be set in October. If you look at that 5-year period, it's about a $2.5 million increase. And it's important to note, in that 5-year period, we didn't levy to the limit on 2 of the 5 years. And in 1 of the years, we actually had a decrease from the year before of a negative 0.50%. So when we point out there $304,820, since we didn't levy to the limit at that time, that is every year a continual savings to the taxpayer of $304,000 because their tax levy base has been permanently reduced. So again, it's just to show the taxpayers when they're looking at this particular slide, we have stayed within the tax levy limit and at times, when possible, came in under the tax levy limit. And even our calculation itself can be calculated at an amount less than the previous year. Any questions on any of the revenues? Or is it okay to move on to Proposition 2?
The last 5 years, is that how long the tax levy has been implemented, or does it go back further?
It goes back further. It goes back to 2012. I just
That's
picked
fine.
5 years. It looked good on this slide.
Yep.
I could give you if you wish more, I could put something together for you. Proposition 2, 2021-2022 Health and Safety Capital Project. Nothing has changed in this presentation or Proposition 3 from February 9th. I just want to put that out there to anyone watching, reading. It's the same presentation.
So no new questions, Henry.
No, there won't be any questions. I can
didn't-
almost do these slides. You want me to come up, Glenn?
I'm welcome.
So
Come on down, Mr.
the
Sherry.
capital proposition number 2,
I don't want you to take my job just yet.
I'm just teasing.
The funding to complete this work will come from funds that are already in our possession from the 2017 Capital Reserve Fund. If this proposition receives voter support, there will be no cost to the taxpayer to complete this work. There will be no increase to the tax levy to complete this work. The total cost of this proposition is $7.5 million. I'm going to go over each project description in detail. The ballot language, this is what the voters will see when they come to the ballot. Shall the Board of Education of the Shoreham-Wading River Central School District be authorized to expend funds already deposited in the Capital Reserve Fund, which was established with voter approval, I might add, on May 16, 2017, known as the Reserve Fund, pursuant to Education Law 3651, for the following capital improvement projects: replacement of unit ventilators at the Wading River School and High School, partial roof repair and recoding at the middle school and high school, partial roof repairs and replacement at the Wading River School, roof replacement at the large group instructional space warehouse, purchase and installation of a generator to provide backup power to certain areas at the high school, removal and reconstruction of 2 student toilet rooms at the middle school, repairs, replacement, modifications, or purchase of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning equipment, ductwork, control systems, and any ancillary or related work required in connection with such projects, and to expend from the reserve fund, therefore, including preliminary costs and costs incidental thereto, in an amount not to exceed the estimated total cost of $7,500,000, provided that the Board of Education shall determine the allocation of cost of each project within said maximum amount. There are 20 unit ventilators are original to the building at Wading River. Some of the mechanical components within the ventilators have been rebuilt as part of the 2017 Energy Performance Project. Some of the mechanical components that were not rebuilt do not operate correctly, such as the outside air control dampers. The unit ventilator cabinets are tattered and worn. The new unit ventilators will accept a higher rated MERV filters, which will improve air quality. Just some pictures of a few of the units. High school unit ventilator replacement, same as Wading River, but there's only 5. These 5 are located inside the music and band suites, as well as the music office. And just a few pictures. High school partial roof repair and recoding. The area to be repaired and recoded is in its 17th year of a 20-year warranty. The areas in black are the areas that we plan on recoding, refinishing. Once the work is completed, we are confident that we will receive at least an additional 7 years on the warranty, if not up to 10 years. Again, a couple of pictures for those of you that haven't been up there, just to show you middle school. And there's a large area of black. These are all the areas that are in need of repair. This is in the 16th year of a 20-year warranty. The plan is to make the necessary repairs first and then do the recoating. Again, minimum, we should see a 7-year extension on the warranty, if not as almost up to 10 years. And a few pictures. Wading River partial roof replacement. The roof area to be replaced was installed in 1998. Is over the boys and girls locker rooms, physical education teacher offices, kiln and storage area. The roof has been repaired on multiple occasions and the repairs did not last. We continually struggle with these roofs, especially after the winter. Large group instructional space and warehouse roof replacement. The existing roof was repaired approximately 20 years ago. The plan is to remove the existing roofing system and replace with a new thermoplastic olefin membrane system. The new roof will have a 20-year warranty. High school partial emergency generator. The key word here is partial. We are not putting a generator in to keep the entire building operational when there's a loss of power. This is a small generator to provide backup electricity to the following areas, primarily the network operations center. The network is best staying in operation when power is lost. Existing battery backup does not provide adequate time to safely bring down all the network systems. The network must be operational for distance learning to take place. And when the network is not operational, the following safety systems are not operational district-wide: phones, access control, and cameras. Removal and reconstruction of 2 student toilet rooms at the middle school. Enhance the building environment by replacing the 2 student bathrooms in Wing 2. These bathrooms are original to the building. The pictures I try to capture do not really do enough justice to it. If you were in the spaces, it's even worse than the pictures show. So it's definitely going to enhance that particular wing when these are renovated. District-wide heating, ventilation, air conditioning repairs, replacement, additions, and modifications of equipment, ductwork, and control systems. Air quality is and has been a top priority of the district. This isn't in reaction to anything related to COVID. Throughout the entire bond process, every time we did work in buildings, we have been making upgrades to the systems. As part of the energy performance contract in 2017, we did make modifications. This year, as I had mentioned through many of the reopening committee meetings, when they were available, the MERV 13 filters, we would try them. I'm very happy to report that we have been deploying MERV 13 filters in some of our units, and the systems are operating with them. They are definitely removing finer particles than the MERV 7 filters were. So again, air quality is and has been a top priority of the district. What this additional funding is just allowing us to plan for future repairs, items that we know are going to need to be replaced. We are currently in the process of having a HVAC assessment performed by an outside contractor, something that I'm sure you recall passing the resolution for a few Board of Education meetings ago. And based on those results, we will receive a list in priority order of what needs to be addressed. And with that report, we will then work with the district architect to outline a plan in order to best utilize this funding to ensure that the air exchange throughout each building meets the minimum requirements and make whatever adjustments are necessary. That's outlined clearly both in the Department of Health guidance and the CDC guidance, how important air quality is. So having this funding available to us for when this assessment comes back to us is putting us in the best position that we could be in to not have a report and then not have the necessary funding and have to wait a year to get the funding. So I thank the Board of Education, the superintendent, in order to support this, to be part of this proposition, because this is a direct impact on the staff and students' experience inside of the building.
Agreed.
Any questions on Proposition 2?
No.
Moving on to Proposition 3, authorization to establish a capital reserve. The capital reserve will be the 2021 capital reserve. To establish this reserve, there is no cost to the taxpayer. Voter approval is needed to establish this reserve and spend from this reserve. So we're asking the voters permission to set up a fund so that as funds are available, we could save them in this fund in order to do capital project work. And when we want to do the capital project work, we will come to you, like in Proposition 2, ask permission to spend those dollars for the work that would need to be outlined. The purpose of this reserve is to plan for future capital work. Establishing this reserve and funding this reserve before the work is needed would ensure that there is no impact on the operating budget or the tax levy. Maximum amount of this reserve is $7.5 million. Probable term of this reserve is 10 years. The source of funding from time to time would be from budgetary appropriations, unappropriated fund balances, from the general fund as authorized by the Board of Education, transfers from other reserves as authorized by law. The ballot language for Proposition 3, shall the Board of Education of the Shoreham-Wading River Central School District be authorized to establish a capital reserve fund pursuant to Section 3651 of the New York Education Law to be known as the Shoreham-Wading River Central School District 2021 Capital Reserve Fund for a probable term of 10 years in an ultimate amount of $7,500,000 plus accrued interest, whose purpose shall be to fund in whole or in part capital improvements to the facilities of the district, including but not limited to reconstruction and renovation of facilities, Americans with Disability Act features, athletic fields, bleachers, auditoriums, ceilings, computers, technology systems, networks, sidewalks, curbing, doors, windows, mechanical and electrical systems, energy management systems, exterior and interior lighting, fencing, flooring, heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems, irrigation systems, locker rooms, gymnasiums, masonry, plumbing and sanitary systems, roofs, security systems, toilet rooms, walls, with such funds to be obtained from budgetary appropriations, transfers of unappropriated fund balances from the general fund as authorized from time to time by the Board of Education, amounts from certain other reserve funds as authorized by law, and the interest accrued on such funds over the term of the Capital Reserve Fund. Any questions on the ballot language for Proposition 3?
No.
If there's no other questions, budget adoption is set for April 20th, this coming Tuesday. And I thank everyone for their time and listening to me. Upcoming budget presentations, April 22nd, Wading River Civic Association. May 4th, budget hearing at the Board of Education meeting. May 13th, PTA Council in the high school. And May 18th is the budget vote.
Thank you, Mr. Arcuri.
You're welcome.
I think I speak on behalf of most of the, really of the board. Every year over year, watching you go through this, and this year was unlike no other, in the sense that you had to go through a number of iterations, the new state guidance and state aid runs. So again, I as a board member feel highly confident, and thank you for the way you position our district financially. It's always a pleasure to watch you go through this, so.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Carey. Okay, I don't think we have any other business, so can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Megan, second. Rob, all in favor? 7-0 approved. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a great night.